Look at that one over there. That one in particular just blows your mind. That's a 3D rendering of some kind of predator crawling down the side of that pillar.
History is written by the winners, but sometimes the Earth keeps its own records. Buried under thousands of tons of dirt in Turkey lies a structure that defies logic. It was built by people who had no metal, no wheels, and no writing. Yet they left behind a message that we are only now beginning to read. New technology has peeled back the layers of soil to reveal a hidden design connecting the pillars.
If Göbekli Tepe hadn't been found, none of this would have happened. But it's led to a widespread interest in the whole area.
It turns out we have been looking at this mystery the wrong way for decades. Geometric secrets of the Stone Age. Geometric secrets of the Stone Age. Schmidt started digging. What he found made no sense. There were massive T-shaped pillars arranged in circles. Some of them were 20 feet tall, some weighed 10 tons. Moving a stone that heavy today requires a crane and a flatbed truck. Moving it 12,000 years ago meant hundreds of men, ropes made of plant fiber, and a level of stubbornness that is hard to wrap your head around. But as Schmidt and his team cleared the dirt, they noticed what was missing. There were no houses. There were no trash pits filled with broken pottery. There were no sources of water nearby. This was not a city. It was not a village. For 20 years, the standard story was that this was a temple. It was a place where hunter-gatherers came to worship, feast, and then leave. It was simple. It fit the timeline. But that story is falling apart. A new team arrived in 2025 with technology that can see through the dirt. What they found buried beneath the surface proves that everything we thought about these simple hunters was wrong. The random circles of stone are not random at all. They are part of a giant machine, and we are just now finding the off switch. The problem with the old way of digging was that it was too focused. You dig a hole, you find a pillar, you study that pillar. It is like looking at a single puzzle piece and trying to guess what the whole picture is. For years, teams looked at the enclosures, the rings of stone, one by one. They measured the carvings of foxes. They looked at the limestone floors. They treated each circle like it was its own separate room. This prevented them from seeing the connection. When you stand in one of the deep pits at the site today, the walls tower over you. It feels enclosed. It feels separate. It is easy to think that the people who built Enclosure A had nothing to do with the people who built Enclosure B. Maybe they were built hundreds of years apart. Maybe one group forgot what the other group did. That was the safe assumption. It kept the mystery manageable. It kept the site firmly in the category of primitive ritual. But the new data changes the scale of the mystery. By using ground-penetrating radar, the new team did not just look at the stones we can see, they looked at the invisible foundations. They mapped the magnetic footprint of the entire hill. What came back on the screens was not a messy collection of separate temples, it was a unified grid. The site was not built in pieces. It was planned, and the plan was based on a shape that requires complex math to get right. The radar scans revealed that the three oldest and largest enclosures, Enclosure B, Enclosure C, and Enclosure D, are linked. If you draw a line from the center point of one to the center of the others, you do not get a random shape. You get a nearly perfect equilateral triangle. The sides are almost exactly the same length. The distance between the centers is roughly 63 feet with a margin of error of less than 12 inches. Think about that for a second. To lay out a perfect triangle on flat paper is easy. You have a ruler and a compass. To lay out a perfect triangle on a rough, rocky hill using stones that weigh as much as a school bus is a nightmare. It requires a master plan. It requires a standard unit of measurement. You cannot just pace it out with your feet. You need a rope that does not stretch. You need a way to keep your angles true. You need geometry. This discovery destroys the idea that these people were just making it up as they went along. You do not accidentally build an equilateral triangle with 20-foot pillars. The builders had a blueprint in their heads. They knew exactly where the center of Enclosure D had to be before they even cut the stone for Enclosure B. This implies a hierarchy. It implies architects. It implies a society that had leaders who could tell hundreds of people where to dig and where to stop. celestial calendars, and animal legends. The geometry goes deeper than just the triangle. The scans show that the pillars are not just standing there, they are pointed. The central pillars in Enclosure B and Enclosure C run parallel to the southern side of the triangle. Enclosure D, which is the biggest and most impressive of the group, sits at the very top of the triangle like the peak of a pyramid. The orientation creates a line of sight. It points north, but not exactly north. It is off by a few degrees. For a long time, people thought this might be a mistake. Maybe they just missed true north. But when you see the precision of the triangle, you have to assume the offset is on purpose. Why point 10 degrees off? Is it pointing to a star? Is it pointing to a mountain? Or is it pointing to a specific time of year? The precision suggests that the layout of the stones served a function. It wasn't just a house for the gods, it was a tool for the people. This brings us to the carvings. If the layout of the stones is a map, the carvings on the stones are the legend. For years we looked at the lions, the boars, and the birds, and we just saw nature. We thought they hunt these animals, so they carved these animals. It makes sense on a basic level, but nothing at this site is basic. A specialist in prehistoric symbols named Dr. Lena Yilmaz has spent months staring at these animals. She wasn't looking for art, she was looking for rules. She found them. The animals serve a strict system. Vultures always appear near the top of the pillars. Scorpions are always on the bottom, and they are always on specific sides of the stone. The vulture is a terrifying bird. It eats the dead. In many ancient cultures, the vulture is the vehicle that takes the soul from the body up to the sky. Seeing vultures at the top of the pillars facing east, the direction of the sunrise, is not a design choice. It is a statement. It links death with the rising sun, with rebirth. The scorpion lurking at the bottom represents the danger of the earth, the underworld. Dr. Yilmaz found something else that everyone missed. Between Enclosure B and Enclosure D, the team found a statue of a human. This is rare. Most of the art here is animals, but this human figure was different. It was lying flat. It had eyes made of shell that stared straight up at the sky. It wasn't standing guard, it was watching. The wear on the stone suggests people touched it, maybe for luck, maybe for fear. The repeating patterns suggest a calendar. If you live by hunting and gathering, you need to know when the gazelle migrate. You need to know when the wild wheat ripens. You don't have a phone, you don't have a paper calendar. You have the sky and the stones. The pillars might have been a giant clock. When the sun hits the vulture, it is time for the feast. When the shadow hits the scorpion, it is time to move the camp. Staggering labor and purposeful burial. The sheer amount of labor needed to make this clock work is staggering. We are talking about limestone blocks that had to be quarried with flint tools. They didn't have bronze chisels, they didn't have iron picks, they had rocks. They smashed rock against rock to carve these intricate 3D animals. Then they dragged the pillars uphill. There is no sign of wheels. They likely used log rollers, but trees were scarce. Or maybe they used grease and sleds. Whatever the method, it required food. You can't haul 10 tons of stone on an empty stomach. Someone had to hunt for the workers. Someone had to bring water. This means there was a surplus. For the first time in history, humans were producing more than they needed to survive just so they could build this thing. This brings us to the strangest part of the story, the burial. After all that work, the carving, the dragging, the geometry, they didn't just walk away. They didn't let the site fall into ruin. They buried it. And they didn't just kick some dirt over it, they packed it in. The radar and soil analysis show that the enclosures were filled with a mix of limestone chips, rubble, and charcoal. It wasn't a natural landslide, it was a job. They filled it all the way to the top. The pressure of the fill is actually what kept the pillars standing upright for 12,000 years. If they had left them open, the weather would have knocked them down. By burying them, they preserved them. The fill is clean, it's mostly rock chips from the quarry. This means they were quarrying stone just to crush it and use it as packing material. The amount of rubble needed to fill Enclosure D is estimated at 1,200 tons. That is more than the weight of the pillars themselves. Imagine the conversation. We spent years building this. Now we are going to spend years hiding it. Why? Why erase your greatest achievement? The charcoal found in the fill dates to around 9500 BC. This gives us a specific time for the closure. It wasn't a slow decline, it happened fast. The soil layers show no rain damage between them. They filled it in one continuous push. It might have taken 6 months of non-stop work. Some theories say the site became radioactive in a cultural sense. Maybe the old gods failed them. Maybe a disease struck and they blamed the pillars. Or maybe the burial was part of the ritual. Maybe the site was like a battery. Once it was charged with enough rituals, it had to be sealed to keep the power inside. Sacred networks and ancient genius. There is another possibility. The triangle discovery hints at a network. 35 kilometers away, about 22 miles, is another site called Karahan Tepe. It has similar pillars, it has similar carvings. It also has a winter solstice alignment. The radar shows that these sites might have been active at the same time. The burial of one might have signaled the opening of another. It wasn't just one hill. It was a region, a sacred landscape where different clans met, traded, and built. The triangle layout at Göbekli Tepe proves they could communicate complex ideas. They could agree on a plan and stick to it for decades. This level of social glue is what eventually led to cities. It led to writing. It led to us. But the burial feels final. It feels like a door slamming shut. The people who filled in the pits were the last ones to know the secret of the geometry. Once the dirt covered the tops of the T-pillars, the triangle disappeared. The alignment with the stars was broken. The knowledge was lost. For 12,000 years, farmers walked over the top of the hill. They planted crops in the thin soil, never knowing that 20 feet beneath their plow blades, a stone fox was staring into the dark. They didn't know that the ground they stood on was an artificial mountain made of rubble. The discovery of the geometric plan forces us to respect these ancient people. We like to think of ourselves as the smart ones. We have the internet, we have planes, they had rocks, but their brains were the same as ours. Their capacity for complex thought was the same. The difference is that they applied their genius to stone and stars, while we apply ours to silicon and screens. The precision of the triangle means they cared about accuracy. They didn't settle for good enough. In a world without metal tools, they demanded perfection. That drive, that need to get it right, is the spark of civilization. It isn't farming that makes us human. It's the need to create order out of chaos. The site is still giving up secrets. We have excavated less than 10% of it. There are other circles underground. Does the triangle connect to them too? Is there a larger shape? Maybe a square or a hexagon hiding in the deep scans? The idea that the site was a temple is too simple. A temple is a place you go to visit. This was a machine you had to operate. You had to move the stones, you had to track the shadows, you had to bury the chambers when their time was done. It was an active process. The pillars at Karahan Tepe show human faces. At Göbekli Tepe, the humans are faceless or headless. The focus is on the animals, but the geometry is human. The triangle is not a shape found in nature. You don't see equilateral triangles in the forest. It is a shape born in the mind. By stamping that shape onto the landscape, they were saying, "We are here. We understand the laws of the world." The real secret isn't buried in the stone, it's in how we choose to see ourselves now. What do you think? Did they bury it to save it or to hide it? And are we ready to hear what they were trying to say? Hit that like button if you want to see more mysteries uncovered, and subscribe so you don't miss the next update.